and welcome to A Sound Constitution here on CHLY 101.7 FM, a show where we focus on health topics important to our community. This year's team is made up of 5 third-year VIU Bachelor of Science in Nursing students with a goal to demystify health issues and address common misconceptions by sharing evidence-informed information from a variety of reliable resources. All information provided on our show will be available in our show notes on our Facebook and Instagram pages. We would like to remind our listeners that information presented in this show is for educational purposes only and does not replace the advice of your primary healthcare professional. If you have any questions or concerns about what's being discussed, feel free to reach out to us on Facebook at A Sound Constitution, Instagram at CHLY A Sound Constitution, all one word, or email us at asoundconstitution@gmail.com. We would like to start our show by acknowledging that we are on the unceded territory of the Nanaimo people, with a broadcast range that overlaps the Coatsun and Siaman territories. This acknowledgement is done with gratitude to the Nanaimo people and with the intention to increase awareness about truth and reconciliation processes and efforts on Vancouver Island. Additional information and resources surrounding Nanaimo history, reconciliation, protocol, and land acknowledgement can be found on our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube pages. My name is Dana, and I'm your host today, and we're going to be talking about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We're going to go over how they came to be, what they are, what they mean to our community, and how COVID has drastically affected the course of progress on so many of them. I'm going to be touching base with my co-hosts and teammates today, Habin, Cam, Taylor, and Amanda, to talk about why we chose the Sustainable Development Goals as our season theme and how they relate to issues we're very passionate about. Later in the episode, Habin sits down with Dr. Pam Shaw, who is the director of the Masters of Community Planning program at VIU and the research director for the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region Research Institute. With her is Courtney Vaugeois. She is the Assistant Research and Community Engagement Coordinator, who is also at Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region Research Institute. They will be here to talk about the connection between VIU, the community, and the Sustainable Development Goals. So stay tuned.
We can be.
We must be the first generation
to end extreme poverty.
The generation
Most determined
to fight injustice
and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done. The global goals.
a 15-year plan
For everyone, everywhere.
with no one left behind.
We will live in a world
Where nobody
anywhere
lives in extreme poverty.
Where no one
goes hungry.
where no one
wakes in the morning
Asking if there will be food today.
We will live in a world where no child has to die.
Diseases we know how to cure.
and where proper health care
is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world
where everyone goes to school
and education gives us the knowledge
and skills
for a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities
to thrive
and be powerful
and safe.
We cannot succeed if half the world is headed.
we will live in a world
where all people can get clean water
and proper toilets
At home,
at school
and at work.
We will live in a world where
there's sustainable energy for everyone.
Heat,
light,
and power for the whole planet.
without destroying the planet.
We will live in a world where economies prosper. A new wealth.
Lead to decent jobs.
for everyone.
And we will live in a world where our industry,
Our infrastructure and our
Best innovations.
Are not just used to make money, but to make all our lives better.
We will live in a world
Where prejudices and extremes of inequality
Are defeated
inside our countries,
and between different countries.
where people live in cities and communities
that are safe, progressive,
and support everyone who lives there.
where we replace
What we consume.
planet where we put back
What we take out of the earth.
We live in a world that is decisively rolling back the threat of climate
change.
where we restore
and protect the life in our oceans and seas.
will restore and protect
Life on land.
The forests.
Animals,
the earth itself.
With peace between and inside countries.
where all governments are open.
And answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
And the justice rules.
With everyone equal before the law.
where all countries and we their people
Work together.
Partnerships of all kinds.
To make these goals a reality.
These are the United Nations Global Goals
For sustainable development.
Let's get to work.
That audio clip comes from a video called We the People, created in 2015 by the Global Goals Initiative as a way to bring awareness to what was the newly created Sustainable Development Goals at the time. The Global Goals Initiative is still active and has this really amazing interactive website that talks about the lifespan of the SDGs and lots of really useful, easy to understand information for those that are interested in more details. You can check it out at globalgoals.org. Before I go over each of the goals, I just want to do a quick recap of how they were all created. In 2015, all 193 member nations adopted the 2030 Development Agenda, known as Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. More commonly, it's known as Agenda 2030 or the 2030 Agenda. This agenda was an accumulation of years of work stemming from the improvements and missed targets from the Millennium Development Goals that were created by the United Nations back in the year 2000. Within Agenda 2030, there are 17 interlinked global goals that were identified as a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for everyone. 2030 stems from the target date to meet all 17 goals, so that gave a timeline of 15 years, to which we are 6 years into now. But when they were created, the SDGs in that form were pretty broad and overwhelming, even for national governments and NGOs to try to figure them out. So, in 2017, a UN resolution adopted by the General Assembly made the goals more actionable. The resolution outlined specific targets within each goal, along with indicators that were used to measure progress. Each goal has roughly 8 to 12 targets, and each target usually has 1 to 4 indicators as a way to measure progress. So it's been quite handy to have these targets and indicators because it tells the stakeholders involved in what ways that progress has been made effectively and maybe what areas need a different or more comprehensive approach to meet those goals. Monitoring of progress is completed through the United Nations Economic and Social Council. They publish yearly reports that outline the progress, setbacks, and how we are on track with the goals and statistics. Understandably, Agenda 2030 and the SDGs are a huge topic for a 1-hour show, but we've gathered some excellent sources and we're going to post them in our show notes for those that would like to learn more. One thing we're going to be discussing today is the Sdg Index. This breaks down the goals by country and how each country is doing. So, that's the history of the SDGs in a very, very small nutshell. But what do the goals actually say and what is their focus? The easiest way to think about the goals is based on the United Nations promise that no one gets left behind in this world. Now, it would take me a lot of time to go over all 17 goals and their targets and their indicators, so what I'm going to do is just explain what each goal is called and go over the main focus. Goal number 1 is no poverty, and the focus here is to end extreme poverty by 2030. Goal number 2 is no hunger. The focus is ending hunger, achieving food security, improving nutrition, and promoting sustainable agriculture. Goal 3 is good health and well-being. The focus is to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Goal 4 is quality education, and the focus here is on ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all of us. Goal 5 is gender equality, and the focus is to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls around the world. Goal 6 is clean water and sanitation. The focus is to ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Goal 7 is affordable and clean energy. The focus is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Goal 8 is decent work and economic growth. Here it's about promoting sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Goal 9 is industry, innovation, and infrastructure. The focus on building resilient infrastructure, promoting inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and fostering innovation. Goal 10 is reducing inequality by focusing on reducing income inequality within and among countries. Goal 11 is sustainable cities and communities. It's about making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Goal 12 is responsible consumption and production. It's to ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns for everyone everywhere. Goal 13 is climate action, and that's focusing on taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts by regulating emissions and promoting developments in renewable energy. Goal 14 is life below water, and that's about conserving and sustainably using the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Goal 15 is life on land, and that's about protecting, restoring, and promoting sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably managing forests, combating desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. Goal 16 is peace, justice, and strong institutions. The goal is to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Goal 17 is partnership for the goals. Here it means to strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for all sustainable development. Now, that was a lot to say, and goes back to what I was saying about feeling overwhelmed. I know when I started learning about these goals, it was really hard to wrap my head around them because it seemed unattainable, kind of like it was more for NGOs and governments than it was for the average citizen. But when I started reading into the goals, much of what they talked about is really applicable to our community. Let's look at Goal 6, which is about clean water. It has a target that everyone has universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water. Yet, here in Canada, we know that there are dozens of Indigenous communities that have boil water or do not consume advisories. As reported via First Nations Health Authority, both Ucluelet First Nations and Sartlip First Nations in Brentwood have long-standing advisories, and that's not to mention periodic intermittent boil advisories many additional Indigenous communities experience at far greater rate than non-Indigenous communities. Goal 13 is all about climate action, and each of us in British Columbia have lived through some pretty extreme weather events lately, whether it's the heat dome in June 2021 or the atmospheric river that caused extensive flooding and landslides in November of 2021. And as another example is Goal 14, Life Below. It states that one of its targets is the sustainable management and protection of marine and coastal ecosystems. With 28,000 kilometers of coastline, and countless peoples whose livelihood depend on the ocean, the targets of this sustainable goal are paramount to BC's economy, environment, and the well-being of its citizens. So these are just 3 examples. As I continue to explore the goals and their targets, I really can see how they are relevant to my country, my province, my community, and myself. As I look through the targets, I can relate so many of them to living here on Vancouver Island, to working here as a licensed practical nurse for Island Health, and to being a student here at VIU. The Sustainable Development Goals address topics I care about and the ways I want to practice as a nurse. It's also a good guide for engaging with various levels of government, from City Hall to Ottawa, and hopefully one day I'll be able to advocate for my home on an international level. But those are just my thoughts. I asked my teammates why they were interested in taking on the SDGs as a theme this season, and here's their responses.
To be honest, when Dana brought up the theme of SDGs, I was totally confused on what she was talking about. This in itself is what made me realize it was probably a good theme to pursue. If I didn't know what the SDGs were as a student who was starting to take another class on them, I assumed many other people would be in the same position. So why not take the opportunity for myself to learn more about the SDGs, supplement my learning in my other course, and provide the community with my new knowledge and understanding so that we can all work together to promote these goals successfully. As I began to look into the SDGs, I realized all 17 were important issues that we as a community and individuals should all be passionate about and work towards completing. We have 8 years left to work on these goals to help create a better future for all, not just locally, but globally. By providing information through a sound constitution, the community will hear how important it is for us to support and promote the SDGs over the next 8 years and beyond.
I am interested because the SDGs are globally relevant, so no matter where you are geographically, at least a few of the goals are relevant to you. I also thought it would be helpful as we are learning about the SDGs in our theory courses, and it's important to pull theory to practice, which helps to expand our knowledge and see how the SDGs work on a smaller scale within our community.
I agreed to using the SDGs as our theme for this season because changes happen when people become aware of these issues. Also, to achieve these SDGs, we need to work together to solve these challenges, and that involves everyone.
I wanted to discuss the SDGs on a sound constitution because, like many of my classmates, I was just starting to learn about this topic. I didn't feel like I knew enough about the SDGs, but I was starting to understand their relevance in building a better future. When Dana proposed the SDGs as a theme for our season of A Sound Constitution, I recognized it was an important opportunity for us as nursing students to partner with our community and provide them with the relevant information that is required to engage in the development of a better and more sustainable future. By choosing to discuss the SDGs, we hope that our community can begin to have their own conversations about our future. By choosing to share what we are learning, we hope that our community will seek to expand their own knowledge and understanding about the SDGs. By choosing to interact with the community through A Sound Constitution, we are hoping to build a partnership that will inspire each of us to achieve the SDGs in our own way.
I am home. I give you comfort. I shelter your family. See me for who I am. Home, sweet home. I am your refuge. I am the floor that supports you. The foundation that keeps you steady. The walls that give you shelter. The roof that protects you. I am your home. If you don't take care of me, I cannot take care of you.
Welcome back to A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as the theme for our season. Now that I've gone over why they are and why our team decided to focus on them, I thought I'd share a bit of insight into how Canada is approaching the SDGs. On a national level, there is a policy focusing on accelerating progress of the goals. The Government of Canada outlines their objectives in the report Towards Canada's 2030 Agenda and National Strategy. This strategy was created in consultation with all levels of government, Indigenous peoples, municipalities, civil society, private sectors, and over 44,000 Canadian citizens. It is an important document that focuses on progressing the SDGs in Canada and abroad. With that report, $11.3 million was given to fund 32 organizations who are focusing on advancing the goals. These included not-for-profit organizations, municipalities, academia, Indigenous and racialized communities, and the private sector. Across Canada, there are countless organizations taking part in moving the goals forward. We actually have a link we're going to share in our show notes that takes you to an interactive map of Canada that you can use to explore what organizations are involved and what they're doing with the SDGs. In our community, we have organizations like United Way Canada. And then there is the Young Agrarians. They are an array of rural and urban farmers, market gardeners, seed savers, and food activists focusing on land stewardship and growing local food resilience. Then we have Vancouver Island University. VIU is a local leader in addressing the SDGs and has laid out a strategic plan that incorporates the goals into how the university connects with itself and connects with the community it supports. So that leads us to the next question. How is Canada doing? And honestly, that is a much more complex question, particularly in the light of COVID's impact, and we're going to be discussing that shortly. As I mentioned earlier, there is an interactive website called the Sdg Index that basically takes all the data and reports from governments, from organizations, and from the United Nations to assess how each country is meeting the goals. It was really handy when I wanted to review how Canada is actually doing. Out of 165 member nations, Canada is 21. When I went and reviewed the 17 goals, we have only achieved one of them, which means we've met the target of those goals, and that is in our quality education. But in fairness, we are on track for meeting goals 1, no poverty, goal 3, good health and wellness, goal 8, decent work and economic growth, goal 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure, and goal 11, sustainable cities and communities. Though there's one thing I wanted to address, and that is Goal 8, decent work and economic growth. That's because right now, I can imagine a lot of people are not really feeling that's accurate. When COVID has affected so much and people have lost their jobs or they've been laid off, we're seeing inflation, housing prices are rising, food prices are rising, we may question whether or not we really do have decent work and economic growth. But it comes to also understanding what Goal 8 is actually looking at. The basis of this goal is related to slavery, unemployment rates, and labor rights, to name a few. Also to consider that the last numbers that were provided to the Sdg Index were also from 2019, so prior to COVID. We won't fully understand the impact of COVID until those numbers are updated. Oh, and for those of you wondering what the top-ranking countries are for meeting the SDG goals at this time, well, they are in order: Finland, Sweden, and Denmark, all who have reached many of the goals or are near reaching many of them. Next up, I have an audio clip to share from a video created by Global Citizen that talks about the impact of COVID on the SDGs. Global Citizen is an international education and advocacy organization working towards ending extreme poverty. If you'd like to learn more about them, check out their website at globalcitizen.org.
The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, are a series of goals that aim to end poverty, protect the planet, and improve the lives and prospects of everyone by 2030. But COVID-19 and its effects are a significant setback in progress towards these SDGs, and the most vulnerable are especially impacted. In 2015, the UN member states made it their mission to achieve peace and prosperity by 2030. To measure governments' progress towards this mission, they established 17 sustainable development goals that each country was tasked to meet. But COVID-19 has presented a unique challenge in accomplishing several key SDGs. The goal most directly affected by COVID-19 is SDG 3, Good Health and Well-Being. Across the world, people are getting sick and dying from COVID-19. Because healthcare systems have been overwhelmed by the virus, they are unable to care for those with other illnesses as well. The pandemic has deprived children of their regular education, which impacts SDG 4, quality education, and its end goal of helping people escape poverty. It is estimated that 90% of students worldwide are already out of school, and this has exacerbated the inequality between the richest and poorest students. In low-income countries, children of the richest 20% have a 79% education completion rate, while children of the poorest 20% have a 34% completion rate. It is also estimated that education online is out of reach for at least 500 million students worldwide. The UN created SDG 5, gender equality, to ensure it is treated as a human right and a necessary foundation for a better world. However, women are facing more consequences of the pandemic than men. The front lines of the pandemic are overwhelmingly female. Worldwide, 70% of all health and social workers are women, putting women directly in harm's way of the virus itself. Because of stay-at-home orders, women across the world are also being harmed more often by abusive partners. The virus has already done significant damage and will continue to do more if governments do not act swiftly to protect the most vulnerable. The UN acknowledges that the first priority must be for governments and healthcare systems to control the disease and mitigate as many of the impacts to the SDGs as possible. Governments must create a map to recovery from COVID-19 that ensures no one will be left behind.
That video was created in July of 2020, just months into the pandemic, yet we were already seeing its impact on the SDGs. 2 years into the COVID pandemic, and we know it has halted or reversed years of progress on poverty, health, and education. I want to share some of the statistics released in the SDG 2021 Progress Report. According to this report, we've seen the first rise in extreme poverty in a generation. And that means an additional 119 to 124 million people were pushed back into poverty. An additional 70 to 161 million people will experience hunger, and that number is on top of the 650 million people who already face food insecurity. COVID has wiped out 20 years of educational gains around the world, It has led to a loss of 255 million full-time jobs, has seen a greater divide in income inequality, and saw women face domestic violence in rates higher than ever before. While there are not official numbers of how COVID has impacted the SDGs here in Canada, we can already kind of see the results of it. Housing prices are increasing for both renting and buying when compared to wages. Food costs are increasing. Our healthcare system is stressed in the face of staffing shortages and not enough bed space. And as mentioned earlier, we are seeing weather events that are leaving paths of destruction to those in their way. Honestly, it sounds dire. And truthfully, sometimes it can feel that way, but we have, as a community, as a nation, as a global citizen, made significant gains towards the SDG goals, even in light of COVID. Now, more than ever, we need to push forward to make up the gains we've lost and move past them so we can actually reach the targets. That is at the heart of our theme this season. We see the Sustainable Development Goals as an integral part to the health of our community that we care so deeply about. With that, we're going to take a short break and return with the start of our interview. Please enjoy this audio clip from a video created by Henkel on the power of sustainability.
We all love our planet. At least, we should. We can all protect our planet. Every day, we can protect the resources we share by creating smarter packaging, by choosing ingredients that meet high environmental and social standards, and that enables a circular economy. We can protect the climate we depend on by switching to low-carbon transport, by building state-of-the-art factories that use less power and greener power, by empowering manufacturers to explore sustainable technologies. We can protect the resources we share every day by using products that save water and energy. Experts predict there'll be more than 9 billion of us sharing this planet by 2050. That means we need to protect it more than ever. So let's put the power of 9 billion minds together. Whoever you are, wherever you are. This is your planet. It's our planet. If you love it, protect it every single day.
Thank you for listening to A Sound Constitution here on CHLY 101.7 FM. Coming up now, my co-host Habin sat down with Dr. Pam Shaw, Director of the Master of Community Planning Program at VIU and Research Director for Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region Research Institute, along with Courtney Vaugeois, Assistant Research and Community Engagement Coordinator, also at the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region Research Institute. Together, they had an informative and varied discussion about VIU and the Sustainable Development Goals. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Pam and Courtney, for taking your time out of your busy schedule to be with us today here on A Sound Constitution. As you may know, A Sound Constitution's theme for this season is United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we thought it would be great to reach out to you about VIU's involvement, especially since VIU is the most involved with these goals in Nanaimo. Why did VIU take an interest in becoming involved with the UN's SDGs?
Well, it started from a number of directions, a number of perspectives. So certainly there's faculty all across campus who have integrated components of the SDGs into their classes in every discipline, in every faculty across the campus. There's people who are covering different parts, different aspects. of them. VIU as an institution became interested in how are we part of achieving or at least working toward the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It's quite a few years ago, so we're edging on 5-6 years ago, as the SDGs were becoming more apparent to the public, to a wide range of people. And VIU has, from the beginning, tried to take a whole university approach to looking at the SDGs and understanding how the SDGs relate to the university. So it's not just about the academics of the SDGs and how they might be addressed in classes, but also how does the university as an institution address the SDGs? How does our means of procurement, the way different departments operate, the way cafeteria operates, even as an example on a very specific level. So how do all aspects of the university relate to these high ideals around sustainable development and achieving, working together with levels of government, with other entities, with other universities, post-secondary institutions to achieve the agenda, the 2030 agenda that the SDGs are working towards. So I think the important part of this is it's not just VIU's role as an academic institution in addressing the SDGs, but we operate, in fact, as a city in a way. How people move on and off campus, all those things relate to how we address the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals.
How did the SDGs influence the strategic plan?
The strategic plan it's a fairly recent document, and it's a new guiding document for the university. So it has a beautiful, succinct vision in the plan: welcoming people, honoring place, and building potential. And then values fall out of that. Commitments fall out of it as well. And our fourth commitment, as you have noted, is to support the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The other three commitments that the plan makes is to advance VIU's Indigenous commitments, deepen equity, diversity, and inclusion, and broaden cultural competencies in a global world. We come out with the strategic plan, then moves toward action. And that's the most important part of the strategic plan. Without action, it's all just words. It's beautiful words on a page with some images behind it. But the important part of this plan looks at what will happen over the next 5 years at VIU. It's around those ideas of learning, becoming more inclusive and healthier place, being the region's hub for research and expertise, building partnerships with Indigenous communities and all potential partners, being leaders for the future generations, looking at life enriching and career building experiences, all those parts of the strategic plan. And it's really the 17 SDGs are so foundational to everything that VIU does and everything that we're working toward. It's the idea that no one aspect of society is separate from the other aspects. And by looking at the SDGs as a foundational element in strategic planning, that's what we're trying to do, is to say life on land ties to education, ties to food security. All these aspects tie together, our partnerships tie together. We have the potential to make an impact, and the SDGs provide a framework for making that impact.
Why is it important for the community to know about and work towards the SDGs?
I feel like this builds off of all of what Pam had just mentioned, is that the SDGs and the work that VIU is doing is holistic. Like, we're looking on every aspect of sustainability and how can we all work together while bringing in all aspects. And so it's really important for the community to know about and work towards the SDGs, because we're at a very critical point of our planet and our humanity. We need to see a shift in our behavior to be more sustainable in order to mitigate and build resilience against the challenges that we see and face due to climate change, biodiversity loss, and just the increasing inequalities that we have. We're already experiencing these, and I know countries across the world have been experiencing for years, but even just in BC, we're starting to see it and actually feel it a little bit more with the flooding, with the heat waves, with forest fires, but also like the most obvious one is COVID, right? So we're definitely seeing a lot of these impacts, and we're at a very critical turning point, and we need to take action. So the SDGs outline an action plan or a framework for countries, organizations, but also individuals. And it's a framework that everyone can follow. It can be overwhelming usually when you think about what you can do personally or as an organization or a community to work towards some of these global and like local issues. And so the SDGs outline this framework through their indicators and their targets and provide a starting point of what we can do. And just knowing about the SDGs is super important, because without knowing about them, then they're not going to be successful. Everyone needs to know about them in order to take action towards them. And so the SDGs and their timeline of 2030 really relies on actions from all levels, including countries, provinces, communities, organizations, and individuals, and universities like VIU.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. Yes, it's really critical to be aware of the SDGs and know about them. Like for us as Bachelor of Science in Nursing program, one of our classes, we're learning about SDGs in them. So is this kind of similar to other programs offered at VIU?
Well, I could speak to the Master of Community Planning program for sure. And so these are students who are hoping to gain employment in planning. So working for a local government, for a First Nation, perhaps working for a campus environment as a planner. And so definitely the SDGs are an important part of what we're thinking about in the planning program. First, because they are looking at the future. So it's the idea of we want to move toward a world that is more sustainable, a world that is more equitable, where there's greater levels of inclusion and justice are evident in the changes that are happening in the world for it. It also establishes a very nice framework from a planning perspective of looking at the world holistically, as I mentioned before. So where you can look at things, you might think planning is mostly about life on land and thinking about zoning and development, but it's every other aspect of the SDGs as well is important. We want to live in places where people are comfortable and safe, where there's economic opportunities, where we are recognizing the impact that humans have on biodiversity. So all those other aspects about partnerships, about education for all and access to education, those are all parts of what you would be looking at in the development of plans and in city building. So it's very relevant to what we're doing in the community planning program. Certainly other programs, other degree programs, other departments are looking at the SDGs. There's wonderful work that's being done across the Faculty of Social Sciences in looking at questions of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Certainly in science and tech, incredible work that's being done on conservation and biodiversity protection. So all across campus, you would not have to dig very deeply to find many beautiful examples of where the SDGs are relevant.
I hope you've been enjoying the interview so far. We're just going to take a quick break.
One way that you can promote SDG number 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, is by advocating for the development of your city to ensure your city is safe for everyone within your community.
Here's how you can contribute to SDG goal number 3. Be part of increasing awareness of and support for mental health ailments such as depression, substance abuse, or Alzheimer's.
Did you know that you can help promote SDG 8 by ensuring that your job has safe working conditions? You can help your employer by giving them feedback about the health and safety of your work site.
So what are some of the resources or clubs on campus that are currently working on the SDGs?
So the beauty of the SDGs, and we've said it a couple of times already, is that they're very holistic. Therefore, there are many ways that people are taking action towards them, and sometimes these ways are very unintentional. So even as Pam mentioned, you don't have to dig very far to find the examples of how people are contributing to the SDGs. So there are many ways on campus that people are contributing to the SDGs unintentionally, but there are also ways on campus that people are intentionally contributing to the SDGs. I think the biggest example of SDG contributor on campus would be the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region Research Institute, or MAPRI for short again. And that's where myself and Pam, we work. Over these years, we've been focusing quite heavily with the SDGs. Initially, we started to get involved with the SDGs when we conducted a review of how VIU is contributing to those SDGs. So this review took place over about 2 years, and in the end, we were able to make many connections between VIU and the SDGs. We also produced a report at the end of that, and that can be found on MAPRI's website. And so this report is a good resource for anyone who wants to see some of these more detailed examples of how VIU aligns with the SDGs and contributes to them. And then beyond that, MAPRI has been working to engage with the VIU community, focusing on increasing awareness primarily Over the last few years, we've had many different opportunities to engage with the VIU community. We've hosted several presentations, workshop, training sessions, booths on campus, and a few other initiatives like a SDG scavenger hunt is something we launched last semester. So we've been working really hard to provide opportunities for students to learn, but also engage with faculty and staff where needed. Another example is VIU's Engaged Citizen Speaker Series, which was launched in the fall of 2019. So the speaker series has the goal of encouraging engaging and meaningful conversations about social challenges and opportunities, and while looking at the SDGs and advancing those. So about twice a year, I believe, they host current speakers who have talked about relevant issues and which all relate to the SDGs. Further, we also have VIU's Sustainability Advisory Committee, which is a committee of faculty and staff and students who provide advice to VIU on topics regarding and related to sustainability, including the SDGs, obviously. The committee also works to support other staff and clubs across campus to host sustainability initiatives or provide advice where needed. And then more on the student side of things, obviously there's a lot of clubs and all of them would tie to the SDGs, whether that be intentionally or unintentionally, but we do have VIU's Eco Club, which is student-led and aims to increase VIU's positive impact on the environment while also encouraging more sustainable behaviors. So there's a lot of things going on at VIU, and those are just a few examples. And I would encourage everyone just to talk with people and take a look around and see if you can make some of those connections, because what we're highlighting today is just a few examples.
Do you guys have any upcoming presentation or workshops coming up?
Although we don't actually currently have any further initiatives or workshops or training sessions planned or in schedule, we do still have the resources and the tools to host anything at any point. So if there is anyone students or faculty or staff on campus who are interested in having Mabry host anything related to the SDGs, we do have the ability to do that.
So how can individual students participate and support this plan, like in class and out of class?
Well, you hit on the first thing is learn something about it. Go read about it. Read about how they were created and who was involved in creating them. I think it's an interesting story on just how inclusive that process was. I'd encourage people to take on a perspective that comes from a place of sustainability. We have one planet. We live an unsustainable lifestyle. So how can we, each of us as individuals, and then for whatever we can influence, whatever sphere of influence that you have in the future, whatever you're responsible for, right from your own personal life to to your employment. And I think we're at an incredible turning point right now in how people are thinking about their place in the world, their context in the world. And I think the SDGs are part of that change that's happening, along with everything else that's happening with pandemic, with different major social justice movements that are happening right now. But I think one of the big changes, we'll look back a few years from now and say, something did happen with the application of the SDGs to every aspect, and by individuals looking at how they fit in this achievement of a global agenda. I truly think a few years from now, we'll look back and say, yeah, some good progress has been made.
I just want to add, just breaking it down and localizing the SDGs to your context and to fit what you're doing, whether that be your work, your school, or teaching, just anything really. So just think about them. Yes, absolutely, they're overwhelming and they're large, and they were actually developed with nations in mind, but they have the ability to be redefined and recreated in a way that fits your context. So as a student or an individual, just think about what connections you have and fit that into your context. And if it's easy to start with one goal, start with one goal, but in the end, they're all interconnected. So if you start with one, you're probably going to make connections to the others. So don't be afraid to take those steps, and don't stop with one step. Keep going and hit some more SDGs once you feel like you've achieved one, and you can keep going.
Are there other organizations within the community that work in collaboration with VIU or independently towards the SDGs?
So as we previously mentioned, there's many ways that groups, individuals, or organizations could be contributing to the SDGs unintentionally. So therefore, I do believe that there would be many organizations in the local community who are contributing to the SDGs. A couple that I'm aware of, but I don't know much about, would be the Nanaimo Climate Action Hub. They work to advance solutions that reflect the urgency of climate crisis through advocacy, local initiatives, and collaboration with other organizations. So I do know they have some connections to VIU and some faculty here. Also, there's the Nanaimo Science Program, which offers hands-on science education engagement for youth and families, including looking at topics related to sustainability. But if you take a step back from the Nanaimo community, looking at the broader Vancouver Island community, there are some communities and organizations who are working directly with the SDGs. So for example, we have the South Vancouver Island chapter of the British Columbia Council for International Cooperation, which is a network of individuals and organizations focused on social justice and advancing the SDGs. They work to create networking opportunities, providing education and training, increasing community awareness, and facilitating youth engagement. So that chapter is part of the larger BCCIC, or the British Columbia Council for International Cooperation, that has a lot of resources and initiatives on the go related to the SDGs. So if anyone is interested, I would recommend them as a good starting point to see what's going on. They've mapped out different organizations and communities across Canada as a whole who have been working towards the SDGs. And on Vancouver Island, they are working with the Comox Valley and the Cliquot Sound Biosphere Trust to contribute to the SDGs. So they're doing great work, and I think it's a great resource locally. They're based out of Vancouver, but again, they have a couple of chapters on Vancouver Island, so the South Vancouver Island one, but also the Comox Valley chapter as well.
I would add there's 3 biosphere regions in British Columbia. So we have Mount Arrowsmith on the east side of the island, Cliquot on the west side of the island, and then Canada's newest biosphere region, Howe Sound, and so over across the strait from us. But those are 3 organizations that are intimately connected to achieving the goals established by the United Nations, by UNESCO, and the Canadian Commission for UNESCO. And so the SDGs are highly relevant to the work that's done by those 3 entities. So I'd say the city of Nanaimo is doing good work, and I'll add that. And I'd encourage people, if you're interested in helping the city set goals and identify those areas that are most important to you as citizens of the city, even if you're here temporarily as a citizen, your voice matters. And the city is going through a planning process right now called Reimagine Nanaimo. And I encourage you to Google Reimagine Nanaimo. There's a series of surveys you can take and share your ideas on what you see for the future of this place. There's all kinds of important ideas that have been collected already, but the city's very interested in hearing especially from students, and all the bright ideas that students have, and bringing perspectives from other places. And we have the ability to create the future of Nanaimo. We have Nanaimo First Nation locally doing excellent work from a conservation, environmental protection, and economic development perspectives. It's a little further afield, but I have enormous admiration for Malahat Nation and the work that they've recently completed in creating the Malahat Skywalk. And you'd say, well, how does the Malahat Skywalk relate to the Sustainable Development Goals? But it relates very strongly to the economic aspects of the SDGs, but it also it's created employment for individuals. It's creating a new tourism focus for Vancouver Island at a time when tourism has very much suffered because of the pandemic. So there's all sorts of entities who are doing things that perhaps on a day-to-day basis, they're not thinking, oh, what I'm doing is achieving the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, but it really is work that pulls in that direction. And the more we start to think about that, the more we can draw new connections between things that are happening across all kinds of entities and organizations.
Hey, did you know that promoting SDG number 5, gender equality, is actually quite simple? One thing you can do at home is practicing and demonstrating to children equal decision-making processes.
Want to know how to support SDG 17 partnerships for the goals? Collaborate with organizations that need funding in your area that you feel really strongly about.
What can you do to help end poverty and support Sustainable Development Goal number 1? Try cleaning out your pantry and donating non-perishable food items to your local food bank.
What else can Nanaimo do to support VIU in the process of working on the SDGs?
I think a better question too is, how can VIU support Nanaimo? I think together VIU and Nanaimo can achieve the SDGs by creating meaningful partnerships, respecting what the community needs are, and working with the local cultures as well. I think we can't forget the importance of traditional knowledge, but also local knowledge in sustainability and advancing the SDGs. So I think we need to be considerate of everything that's happening, what are the current local issues, and work together. And so I think it's just through partnerships and collaboration to meet the local needs of the people, including the marginalized and the vulnerable people in our communities. And that goes beyond just Nanaimo, of course. VIU is located in many different communities and has access to many different individuals and communities across Vancouver Island, but also on the mainland with Powell River. So I would argue that it's the same for any location that VIU is we need to make partnerships with who is there and what their needs are and work together to address those and the SDGs.
Is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners?
One of the things that we can all do is try to open our lens to other areas that we might not feel we could strongly contribute towards. So what I'm thinking of right now is particularly areas around justice, inclusion, equity, diversity, that maybe as an individual, you're thinking this would be hard for me to make, to have a big impact in this area, but it's many small things lead to something bigger. And I feel strongly we're at a turning point right now in those ideas around justice and inclusion, much more informing the actions that we take in the future at the university, but just as individuals and in general in society. I think we're at a time where it's a turning point and people are calling out things that are wrong and bad. And even if that's the way it's always been, that's not good enough anymore. And so I feel like that's one way as an individual, as a faculty member at VIU, as a citizen of Nanaimo, there's so much more that I can do that can contribute to something bigger and making real change happen on a societal level. And I'm very excited about the work that's happening on campus and across the world. I'm hopeful for across the world that's happening right now.
The SDGs require a multidisciplinary, multi-step, and multi-approach to achieve them, including bringing in different cultures and diverse perspectives and opinions to achieve them. The SDGs were developed for global action, but they can be brought down to the local action. So any local action we do would have impact on the global community as well. So that means we can't ignore all the global perspectives and the needs of people across the world. So we need to ensure that we're working together and bringing together different ways of knowing and different ways of being to be successful in the SDGs. So absolutely, we need to break down the silos and we need to be interdisciplinary in our approaches. So this podcast hopefully will reach different people and different perspectives and start some great conversations of how we can work together to achieve the SDGs at VIU and in Nanaimo and Powell River and Duncan and in Parksville and just all across BC and Canada.
Well, thank you both so much for taking your time off and to be on A Sound Constitution. We really appreciate it. It was really awesome listening and discussing with you guys and hearing your enthusiasm for this.
Thank you for having us.
And thanks so much for inviting us in.
We can definitely talk for way longer than you.
Oh yeah, definitely. We went over time.
I would like to give a big thank you to Dr. Pam Shaw and Courtney Vaugeois for sitting down with the Sound Constitution and for giving some context to the Sustainable Development Goals and how VIU is using them as a foundation for making change. As mentioned in the interview, if you would like to share your thoughts and get involved with Reimagine Nanaimo, head over to getinvolvednanaimo.ca for the latest information. If you would like to know more about Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region Research Institute and find out what they're up to in your community, check out their webpage at mabry.viu.ca. That's mabri.viu.ca. As we come to a close, I would like to thank my co-hosts for sharing their thoughts on the SDGs and for Habin for doing the interview. Lastly, I would like to thank you, our listeners, for joining me today and for talking about a subject I care very deeply about. While it was a very large topic to cover in a short amount of time, I hope it's created a spark of interest about the role of the Sustainable Development Goals in the health of our community. For details and show notes from today's episode, or to follow along on what's coming up this season, check out our Facebook page at A Sound Constitution and our Instagram, CHLY, A Sound Constitution, all one word. If you've missed parts of this episode, or would like to listen to this episode or episodes from our previous shows, check out our YouTube at A Sound Constitution. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Be well.